Hey guys, what's going on? Today I have a knife review for you of the Kizer, focus there, of the Kizer Domin. This is part of the Vanguard series, so it is done in the way we normally expect the Vanguard series to be done. Stainless steel liners, G10 scales, and VG10 blade. And this is one of those knives that I think is a pretty charming little knife. It's attractive, it comes in interesting colors. I think Kizer hit on the fact that, hey, when they did the bag letter in the stonewash blade and the various colors, they were like, hey, people like this a lot more than when we did it with the green and black. And so they wanted something similar and they came out with the Domin. And I think they have, definitely come close enough to the bag letter that this is going to be quite a win for them. As I say, I kind of think of this knife when I think of my general overall sort of description of it. I think it's just a charming little EDC knife. It's kind of colorful, it's interesting, it's not too expensive, it's reasonably well made, and so there's a lot of appeal here. So let's go ahead and start off with size and weight the way that we normally do. 8 1/16 overall length, 3 7/16 on the blade, 4 5/8 inch on the handle, so 4 5/8. I don't know why I couldn't say that properly. And it weighs in at a very comfortable 3.7 ounces. So 3.7 ounces is not bad. If you take a look in the back there, you can see there's a little bit of milling for weight, but not a lot. And they've gone with a G10 rather than steel backspacer, which does save a little weight. Sorry about the dirt on my hands, guys. I was looking at some stuff on my truck that might need to be replaced. So got a little dirty. I have washed my hands, but you know how grease is. It tends to stick around. Let's talk a little bit about this blade first of all. So we have here, come on you, let's see. There we go. We have here a full flat ground, lightly stonewashed blade in VG10 steel, drop point, very thin behind the edge, fairly insubstantial stock. So it's fairly thin blade stock to begin with. To give you some actual numbers here, this is actually 18 thousandths behind the edge, which is really, really thin. And therefore, as you can guess, you can almost tell just by looking at this, honestly, even if I didn't say a thing about it, I'll bet you 90% of you watching would go, that blade is going to slice. And you would be right. It is a real slicer. VG10 steel is a great steel for the price point. This knife comes in at 50 bucks. And for that, I feel great about VG10, okay? Once a knife, that where I start to get a little disappointed in VG10, if I start seeing a knife, $60, $70, $80, $100, yeah, then I'm likely not going to be quite as impressed with VG10, but at a $50 price point, total win. I'm absolutely happy with it. Thinking of steel, I will say that recently Cedric and Ada Gear and Outdoors has put another sort of knife steel summary video out. He's done a few of these and the most recent one is very good. And if you're interested in just having a general knowledge of what steels are good and what steels aren't so good, check out his recent video. It's very, very good. I will try to put a link in the description box. If I forget, someone please remind me about that. I will also, to the best of my ability, put links in the description box for where to pick one of these up on Amazon if it's available. All right. Now we've talked about the blade. Let's go ahead and check out the action, which is quite nice. All right. The thumb studs are very accessible. The liner lock, as you can see, they've got a nice little cutout there so I can get my thumb in comfortably and easily. Notice the thickness on the lock bar, which is pretty good, and the lockup is nice and solid. I don't want to look at this and see a lock bar over here on a liner lock knife. I really like to see a full engagement just because, it's already fairly thin, and to have this block sitting way over here just is not confidence inspiring. So I really like that not only is this a fairly thick piece of steel with no relief cuts of any kind, but it's fairly well engaged as well. Lockup is very, very solid. Up and down, side to side is just great. I have noticed a couple of times if I use a certain grip, maybe more of a hand, no, not a hammer grip, I don't know. A couple of times I've been able to sort of move that lock with the fat of my finger, which is not ideal, but it only happens in very rare circumstances and you can absolutely feel it move. So, that's not been a problem for me, but I could certainly see, I don't know if I can actually, so I can't get it to fully unlock, okay, but I can, if obviously I do it with my finger, but I can if I kind of twist my hand in a weird way, feel that lock bar moving a little bit. Lockup and deployment is quite good. The action is quite good. I do want to talk about the way that they've done this pivot though, and I'll roll in a couple of pictures right now so you can see, but they have a weird setup, okay? I don't know if tolerances were out at the factory or if just the way, you know, everything came together with the blade stock and the backspacer and all of that, the numbers weren't adding up. But for whatever reason, they have a phosphor bronze washer. So if you imagine sort of a hamburger, okay, and the buns are phosphor bronze, all right, and in the middle they have Teflon. So there are 3 washers in there on either side of the blade. So you end up with 6 washers, which is kind of strange. Okay, that's not something you see often. As I said, the only thing that I can say to account for it is it must be some way that, you know, in order to make up for the sizes that everything needed to be, they had to figure something out, and that's what they've done. Now, because of that, I would suspect, okay, and I could be totally out to lunch on this, but I would suspect that later versions of this knife, if you're not in the first production run, they may make some minor changes to account for that and not need all of those washers. One thing I will say I enjoy is that it is phosphor bronze contacting the steel blade. Excuse me, guys, which I definitely like. So that's my one little weird thing on this knife. It's got multiple washers, which is kind of a strange situation, but in terms of functionality, it's just fine. Now, what about handle construction and ergos? Well, we've already talked about the construction on the pivot, which is kind of strange, but otherwise very functional. In terms of how this is put together, you can see pretty easily there. It's it's G10 stainless steel liners, G10 backspacer, movable clip for tip up left or right side carry. Notice because of the angle on this, they've got to put the holes in a weird configuration on this side. So construction is fairly standard. It's a very open knife. They've done a little bit of milling. Let's see if I can show you that one more time. There you go. So they've done a little bit of milling to save weight. Nothing drastic going on here to discuss under construction, so I won't spend too much time on that. However, ergonomics is something that we can talk about just a little bit more. In terms of actual usable hand real estate, if you will, there's about 3 3/4 inches, maybe 3 7/8 inches for your fingers to fit on here. You can see that I've got quite a bit of room with my, large sized hands. I usually wear a large glove. The way it feels in hand is, not amazing. Okay, if you've ever felt, some knives when you grab a hold of them, they just kind of grab you back and they just feel like they were meant to be in a human hand. You don't really get that from this. Okay, it doesn't just feel like it molds in to be a part of your hand. However, there's nothing uncomfortable about it. Okay, think of holding anything you have to hold on to. You grab a hold of it, you do what you got to do. You don't, think of it as sitting on a kitchen chair versus a sofa, right? If you sit on a kitchen chair, it does the job. It's holds you up, but it doesn't just envelope you in comfort the way a sofa may do if it's a good one. Okay, and that's what I would say about this handle. It works just fine when you're using the knife. There's no hot spots. It's not uncomfortable in any way, but it's not just the most amazing ergonomic thing that's ever existed. All right, so that's how I would describe the ergonomics. Let's go ahead and grab some comparisons. I've got a few different knives here that I think match up fairly well to this. Let's do the Rat Model 1 first of all. This is in D2 steel. No G10 on the Rat 1, but similar price point in the actually no, the D2, this one with the carbon fiber is a similar price point, but in the you can get a regular D2 Rat 1 I think for around $40, so about $10 less than this. And you can also see here that the Rat Model 1 is going to be a little bigger, and I will say the ergonomics are just a little better on the Rat Model 1. Okay, this is one that does kind of lock into the hand a little nicer. Because everyone's familiar with it, let's get a pair of 2 in here. Not because I feel like these are really close competitors or terribly, even similar in terms of just their design and stuff, but everyone knows about a pair of 2, and probably many of you own a pair of 2, so it should give you a good standard for comparison. The other thing is, again, the pair of 2 is going to be a little more molded to your hand than the Domin. Well, we're talking about fantastic budget knives. The Bird Raven, which I recently reviewed, is excellent. You know, if you were, this would be a knife that, you know, I love the look of this. I love the style of it. I can see why it's going to be very, very popular. Honestly, if someone were to just, you know, if you called me up today and said, hey, I want a good budget knife, is the Domin any good? I would say, yeah, it's fine. If you're not totally in love with it though, the bird is fantastic. The action is a little bit nicer. You can see that. The ergonomics are a little bit nicer. The one area that the Kizer really stands out is you get quite a bit more cutting edge with the Kizer, and I definitely prefer that. Here's one more well-made overseas knife. This is the Rake Knives P848. Similar in many, many ways. Again, a very charming, you know, the thing that stands out about these two is not so much that they are, you know, these stellar utilitarian performers, but they're both really, really attractive designs. They're visually interesting. They're not scary. You know, I can definitely, you know, these are both highly appealing as EDC choices. I think the Rake might come in just a little bit less. It does have roller bearings in the pivot, which may be something you don't want if it's just a straight up utility knife. So let's get back here to the Kizer Domin. What are my overall thoughts? What do I think of this knife? I think it's a great knife. It cuts really, really nicely. The blade stock is great for, you know, utility and, you know, food cutting stuff, and VG10 is highly stainless steel. There's a lot of good to say about it. It's comfortable in hand. It's very attractive in terms of the design. I think Kizer has a real win on their hands here, and I can absolutely see why this, as well as the bag letter, are so popular, because they are kind of charming little useful EDC items. So there you go, guys. That's my overall take on this knife. If you like this design, if you like the way this looks, if you feel like this is, you know, a knife that meets your needs, then I wouldn't hesitate to buy one. It is well put together, and I get why people really are attracted to it. If you're just looking for a good budget folder, it's also a good budget folder among a number of good budget folders. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.